Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. You know, y'all, there's not too many people that can say that they've done what they wanted to do for a living, and it was like the goal all along. I have to admit, I count myself as a blessed man. I really do, and this is why. My goal was not always to be a death investigator, but that was a previous career for me. The career that I'm in now is a college professor, and it is something that I think even as a small kid, when I had an awareness that universities existed and all these sorts of things, I always imagined being in that environment. And I've loved it. I truly have. I had a 20-year career as a death investigator, and now I've had a 22-year career as a higher educator. Wow, that sounds pretentious, doesn't it? But I have done it, and I have loved it. There's been ups and downs, but I've loved it. You know, it's an interesting world, the university world. It's unlike anything else. It's cut off from the outside world most of the time. It's almost like academic Disneyland many times. And then when you exit, you get the bill for Disneyland, and then you're smacked in the face with reality. But sometimes the outer world intrudes into academia. And sometimes people in academia do pretty evil things. Today, we're going to talk about one such subject. A professor of rhetoric who wound up murdering his wife. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Brother Dave, I had a long, circuitous route to get my degree. I actually got my degrees as an adult. I wasn't one of these people that went all the way through for the 4 years, and did that. People always ask me, how'd you become a death investigator? They assume that I went and got a forensics degree and then went into the field. Everything happened in reverse for me.
Really?
Yeah. So
Why?
Because I was self-funded. I mean, I knew what I wanted to do.
There you go.
And, I just kind of, I went after it, and did it in the reverse order. And
Right.
Sometimes it was really hard, but there was a piece to it for me that made it particularly easy, because it's like I'd already seen real world applications by the time I started working on a master's degree in forensic science. And I certainly learned things in that program. I'm not one of these people, it's like, you got nothing to teach me. No. I absorbed it all, because there's a lot of forensic practice out there that, I don't commonly involve myself in question document examination or, things like that. And, you learn those little bits along the way, or even forensic psychology, that you have to have part of that. But, for me, I came into it the wrong way. I wasn't one of these people that was kind of birthed into academia and that's the only world that you've ever known. So, but I've been very grateful to have the opportunities I've had, because it gives you a different worldview.
I'm glad you're talking about this, because oftentimes when we talk about college, we talk about how useless it is for so many young people now choosing to go to college and studying something that means nothing in terms of being able to work a career.
Yeah.
Not like you should only go to college for that, but if you're taking a college career path, you need to make sure you understand what career you're going to be educated to do, okay? It's interesting that today we're talking about a professor, but when you start doing the story, it's a former professor. No. When Ella Jackson went missing, when she vanished in October of 2019, her husband, Glenn Jackson, was a professor. Not a former professor. He was a professor.
Yep.
Just like Professor Morgan here. Well, maybe not just like, because we know where Kim is today, don't we?
Yeah. Wait.
All right.
Kimmy.
So Glenn Jackson, 45 years old, and his wife goes missing. And the fascinating part of how this gets turned around is there's two things that Joe Scott Morgan has taught me to do. One is who is the finder of the body and who is the person who reported the individual missing. Those are two really important things. In the case of Ella Jackson, she wasn't reported missing by her husband, Glenn. She was reported missing by her oldest son, Hans. He reported her missing to police when he said they talked all the time, and when he couldn't get up with her, Hans reported her missing. Now, why wouldn't your spouse report you missing? It's a good question. And second of all, is the finder of the body. Those are the people you really want to look at. In this case, Hans reports his mom missing, not husband Glenn. So it's interesting that this story starts off with a missing persons case. We have a professor at a college, and yet Glenn Jackson gets... Do professors get fired?
Yeah, they can get fired.
Okay.
Some are very difficult to get fired because of tenure system.
Wow.
But yeah, they can get fired. If they're tenured, it's a bit more difficult. But
Okay.
I don't know. You start talking about things like, I don't know, murder, missing, all these sorts of things, and it's kind of an uphill battle to. But I know of stories where there are people in academia that have done some pretty, what do the kids say now? Been pretty sus, and yet they're retained.
Right.
And you're still sitting there thinking, I'm trying to be a really good person, on campus and be fair and do all the things that you need to do. But yet, you've got somebody, in the rumor mill turns, and you hear about, wait, they did what?
Right.
And they're still teaching, but yeah, it does happen.
All right, Glenn Jackson was an English lecturer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
And by the way, this is at Eastern Kentucky.
Yeah. EKU.
Yeah. My father went to Western Kentucky, and
the Hilltoppers.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
So Eastern Kentucky, he is an English lecturer. What does that mean, Joe? Does that mean that most people in Kentucky don't speak English properly?
No, it's
And by the way, my dad is really from Kentucky. I'm being serious. I'm not knocking anybody from Kentucky when I say, I'm just making an offhanded joke.
I think it's
what is an English lecturer doing in Kentucky? That's what I want to know.
Well, he's at EKU, which is it's Eastern Kentucky. So it's over in Richmond, Kentucky. By the way, they've got a fantastic public safety program that they've had for years and years. They do a lot of fire science there, which is something I advise students all the time. And so
you're such a firebug.
I know, right? I am.
Wow.
But yeah, EKU is a great institution, particularly.
Did any of your houses or anything get burned when you were a kid? Did you?
No,
I'm just
got caught by playing boxes of matches. No, but I do get hypnotized by fire every now and then. I think we all do. But yeah, so yeah, he's a lecturer and he's in the English department. And sometimes you'll hear you hear these ranks within universities, and it'll be dependent upon the university system, whatever state you're in. And sometimes if it's a private university, it'll be dependent upon how they have their ranks set up. So typically you'll hear the lower rank is generally instructor, then it's assistant professor, then associate professor, and then full professor. All right.
Okay.
An adjunct to that, you can have individuals that are known as lecturers, okay? And then you have senior lecturers, which I think this fellow was. And many times with these lecturers, it's a different kind of rank structure that they have there, and they do other things like they write, which I know that sounds odd, but it's not just about research. It's also about, they've got works of fiction that they're working on, or maybe they're contributing to, I don't know, whatever it is, biographies, or, they're doing all kinds of things within their realm of study. So that rank structure is a little bit different, but he was a lecturer, a senior lecturer at EKU. And it's a rather esteemed post to have.
Well, one of the first things that happens when somebody is reported missing, police start asking questions, hey, who saw her last? When was she last seen? And in this particular instance, Glenn and Ella had been married about 6 years. Ella has a 5-year-old son. And in that 6 years of marriage, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say there were some issues.
Yeah.
Okay. A number of times there were issues, which kind of goes on to explain why it was her son, Hans, who reported her missing and not her husband, although her husband did report her missing. But, Joe, when police were talking to Glenn Jackson, the esteemed lecturer, English lecturer at EKU, he gave them some odd stories and multiple stories, okay? And, we've said this before. A lie has to change to fit facts as they're found out, whereas the truth never changes because it's the truth. And so once a man or a woman tells a story and that story changes, I know we're talking to somebody who is involved probably in a very negative way. And that's where Glenn Jackson appears in this story as somebody who couldn't keep his story straight. But he tells police about his wife. Yeah, she's gone before. She's done this before. She's gone off and she always returns. What? Her son reported her missing because he's worried, and you're telling us she's done this before. It's not a big deal. Joe, have you seen stories start off like this before?
Yeah, I have, and it's a misdirection. When you begin to get this narrative like that. First off, that's a very blanket statement. Now, I lean more into people that say she's never done this before. This is something that's so far outside the realm of her normal behavior. I don't understand it. What, and many times when you have people that are in a loving, committed relationship, and trust me, there's more of those in cases where spouses go missing than there are of the other. I've seen people so distraught, they're crushed. I mean, and they've been looking and looking, and we only talk about these cases that, where the spouse is a suspect, but there are those cases out there where you can, it's palpable, the grief that's going on within the person. You're sitting there and you're thinking, I really want to help, I want to try to understand this in some way. But yeah, you automatically, your lie detector goes off, in your brain when you're trying to understand, does this marry up with the narrative that somebody's trying to sell me? And literally it is a sales job. And you can't fathom why they would be doing this at first, because, even as investigators, you don't want to go down a sinister road with somebody. You always suspect it, or you always have to keep it, in the forefront of your mind. As a human, you don't want to think, well, this person I'm talking to that's married to an individual, that they would do that. They would have anything to do with anything involving harm that might come to this person they say they love. But unfortunately, in this case, as we shall discover, the truth is terrifying. So, Dave, just so that we're oriented to time and space here, and we begin to think about what has occurred up in eastern Kentucky. Starting off, I think our story actually starts off in Richmond, which is where EKU is located. Can you kind of backfill some of these gaps relative to time and, what happened to Ella?
It's fascinating, Joe, how these stories come about. Oftentimes when we start with a story, we're looking at a couple here, and they were only married 6 years. And that's not a really long period of time when you're looking at a relationship. So it's kind of compressed where you can find out what was going on, Were they okay together? And they weren't. This was a couple that had a lot of issues early on. Let me throw out a couple of ideas here, Joe, because Ella went missing while walking the dog. All right? That's the story that we actually end up sticking with, I guess. She goes missing. Her husband doesn't do well in his interviews. Police are right on top of him early on. And you got to remember that as adults, we can leave, okay?
Yeah.
And not tell anybody where we're going. And police have to figure out, just because somebody reports another adult missing doesn't mean they're missing in a bad way. They could just be wanting to escape a bad situation. So as police start looking around, Joe, well, they find a few things. They find blood in Glenn Jackson's car in the trunk. And you've said this before, finding just blood doesn't mean everything, but when you find enough blood that doesn't appear to show somebody able to survive losing that much blood, the investigation takes a turn. And in this case, that's exactly what happened. This blood evidence, it was a substantial amount of blood in the trunk of Glenn Jackson's vehicle. Luminol was used. Joe, before we started doing this show, I thought that when luminol was used, that you had an area that appeared clean on the top, on, just it looks clean, but you would use luminol and it would lighten up, showing the iron or whatever else is in blood that shows up that can't be erased with just using bleach or Clorox or whatever. And that's not really the case. You have only seconds, a very short window of time to see the luminol interacting with whatever blood is there. Is that correct?
Yeah, you do. And I always talk about, the military talks about you need to be weapon ready,
Okay.
In crime scene, particularly when it comes to these chemical luminescent events, you have to be camera ready because it has a very short life. So if you're going to snap this, and you have to, it's really weird. You have to kind of set up on the spot that is being treated, and you have to be zoned in so that you're focused to hit that shutter, because when the lights go off, you're going to click that. You're going to click it, and you're going to try to get as many shots as you possibly can in that short period of time and capture it, because it's not just a matter of demonstrating that there is what appears to have been or is blood there that's being captured in the image and is also luminescing as a result of the application of the luminol. There's things that you can take away from it, right? First off, I find it interesting that you mentioned, you didn't actually use the words, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you talked about volume. That there
Right.
was a significant amount of blood that's there. And just so people understand, I've talked about this before, I always want to emphasize this when it comes to what we can do at crime scenes. If you have blood that is on the surface, say it's in the trunk of a car, or I think this was a RAV4, I'm not really sure, but a lift lid on the back, and you've got kind of a carpeted surface. You might have that big rubber pad back there, but you might have carpeted surfaces. And even if you have cracks, where like you might have a buried tire down there and it's got that compartment you can lift up and you'll have dripping. You can never actually calculate that volume. That's something that you can't put a number to. I think because people at scenes, investigators, they might ask the forensic scientist, how much blood is here? Well, there's a lot of depth to that question, in the sense that what they're looking for you to say is there enough blood here to demonstrate that whatever happened here was so catastrophic that it's incompatible with life?
That's
And
what I was trying to come up with. Incompatible with life.
and you can't do that just by seeing a stain. The other piece to this that you can take away with luminol is you can also appreciate anything that's been cleaned up. Let me give you an example. So I'll use my phone as let's say we have a crack running, in the structure, the substructure of the floor of the vehicle. You've got blood that's deposited right here. Maybe it's been wiped up and cleaned right here, but you've got all this that has run down into the crack. Okay, it's dried. Well, when you luminesce this area, you're going to get luminescence down here too, depending upon how you spray it and how you spread the stuff out. You can see, for instance, on the top surface that this has been swiped or wiped. So that's demonstrative of the potential that somebody tried to clean this up. That means that somebody had an awareness that there was blood back there, And they wanted to disguise it and hide it from everybody else. But what they didn't count on is the ledge right here, or the edge where it's dripped down in there. And they didn't lift it up to clean that area. So we can look at what that information provides with chemical luminescence there. Then, on top of that, you can appreciate things like drag marks. And I've seen this. I've talked about how hair, many times when you luminous an area that where you have a bloody head, it looks like an old dirty mop has been dragged across the floor. You can kind of see it as it's moving away. You can also see dynamicism with blood. You can see how it's fallen. You can see how it's deposited if it's like a high impact thing. So it's amazing what you can learn from it about, and it literally, Dave, and we talked about this before, how it freezes that critical moment in time, right?
Right.
That's the beauty of photography also at crime scenes, because no crime scene that you go back to is going to be the same as it was before. So with photography, and when things that luminescence that you're using, you're freezing that moment in time so that you can go back as an investigator and review it. You can demonstrate it to somebody, maybe a colleague that's going to take over the case from you, or you can display it in court and give the people in court an idea as to what had happened or what you think happened as a result of it. And of course, it's up to the jury to draw their own conclusions.
And that's why this is so important, that the luminol blood in the back of that RAV4, okay, Toyota RAV4. The RAV4 actually has their the spare tire is on the back of the trunk of the lid.
That's right. Yeah,
it's on the outside. So underneath, when you look in that, the Toyota RAV4, as you lift up the carpeted hard thing, there is a shelf underneath. There's two of them, and so there was a substantial area that investigators could see where it appeared that there had been a lot of blood and it had been cleaned up. So that was the first tip. The second tip, Joe, was that, well, they found out that Ella was talking about a divorce with an attorney, and Ella had reached out to domestic violence shelter. Now, as police are investigating and they're hearing domestic violence shelter, they're hearing an actual recording of an argument between Ella and Glenn, a recorded argument. You realize how powerful that evidence is?
Oh, my God.
You're investigating and you can hear. Now, you've got the husband of 6 years, the father of her 5-year-old son, is acting like this is no big deal. Yeah, she's done this before. And then he changes to, yeah, she's a danger. She has abandoned our 5-year-old son. That kind of back and forth from the husband, who was not the first one to report her missing. The blood in the back. She's contacted a lawyer about a divorce, and she has been in touch with a domestic violence shelter. They're taking a closer look at mighty Professor Glenn. So much so that as the investigation is, remember, she went missing in October of 2019. The investigation goes all the way through Thanksgiving, Christmas, the New Year. In February, Eastern Kentucky cuts ties with Professor. Glenn is cut, boom, gone. We're done with you. They have found out enough that they no longer want this man on their campus as a professor. So he loses his gig in February, and they don't find her body right away. She's still missing when he is fired. But she is found. And Joseph Scott Morgan, her body was found in the woods, out in the country area, out in the county.
Mm-hmm.
Her skeletal remains are found, I guess is a better way to put this. There was some of her clothing scattered about, which could have happened by the person who put her remains there, or could have been drugged by animals. But Ella Jackson, her remains were found in April. February, Jackson's fired. How much could we expect in terms of her remains if they were left out where they were found, in an exposed area, not buried in a shallow grave, but actually left to the elements, just drugged there and dropped off? What would we expect to find, Joe?
Surface deposition, it's going to be scattered remains. And here's why I know. We already have an indication there has been a bloodletting. I'm not saying that uninjured bodies are not tempting to animals, okay, because they are. I've seen it proven out. However, if you really want to up it, cut a body, dismember a body, do some kind of injury where that exposed tissue is out there and you've also got more blood out there. I, I'm not trying to be crass here, but you're ringing the dinner bell at that point in time. So the fact that you would have clothing scattered about, it would, if I was looking at this, I would think that the body is being disarticulated post-mortem and being drug about. And you might have, say, animals that are, they might pull on a pants leg, they might pull on a shoe, and with the shoe comes the foot, okay, because it's in such a state of decay. They grab the head, which they will. Dogs love to do this if it is a dog, and they grab the head by the hair if there is hair, and it's still, because with the dead, with decomposing bodies with hair, one of the things you have to be very careful with the hair is that in an advanced stage, hair will literally slough off. So when you put your hands into the hair of a decomposing body and you try to use that to tug on a body, you'll get a huge clump of hair in your hand. But you would find, Dave, you would actually find hair remnant around that body, and you don't know if it trails off. I think my question would be, where were each element? How far? What was your dispersal pattern relative to the deposition of the remains? Where did they rest? And how? To what degree did you have what's called denuded bone, where you might have a dog that gets, um, the bones of the arm, maybe the humerus, the ulna and the radius, and they take it off and denuded. They're going to the end of the bone like that and chewing on it, and you'll see the end of the bone itself begin to kind of crack away, and they're chewing on it because what dogs and animals are trying to get to in bone in particular is going to be the protein, and they want to get to the marrow. All right, so that's why they'll chew on bones like this. This is after, of course, soft tissue is gone. One of the other evidences that you can see, and you have to have a real keen eye for this, when you look at the long surface of a bone, say you're looking down the axis of, the ulna and the radius, or, the tib fib or the femur or the humerus or whatever, you can actually see gnaw marks. And the big thing with gnaw marks is you're trying to, first off, you want to see if they're human. That has happened, okay? You can see human gnaw marks on bones, and they're very distinctive from any other kind of species. Then you can look at dogs, and they have a certain pattern that you can pick up on for potentially forensic anthropologists. Squirrels, rats, all of them, because of the way their dentition is shaped. And so the tub, and the reason I'm telling you this and telling our friends this is the fact that you have to be able to discern between these post-mortem events that have occurred and what may have led to Ella's murder. Wow, Dave, we're talking about a mama, okay, small child, walks off with her dog, allegedly, is not seen again until skeletal remains are found. And, she's got a child, left behind in the wake of all of this. It's just horrible stuff, man.
I want to back up on something, Joe, because look, this case, when you look at the dates we're talking about,
yeah,
Ella Jackson goes missing in October of 2019. As police begin the investigation, they talk to the husband. By the way, it was her older son, Hans, from a previous relationship, who called to report her missing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. When police go to the house, they find her husband, says, yeah, she's done this before. She'll come back, But they talk to him some more, and then it's, yeah, she abandoned our child, you know? So police already got an icky feeling from this professor. As they begin the investigation, they're finding blood. They're finding a lot of other things that we're not told about, too. They find out about that this is a violent relationship, that Ella is seeking help. She has talked to a domestic violence shelter. She has talked to an attorney about a divorce. And police are talking to this professor. Well, you know what? They're also talking to other people at campus as well. Because I couldn't figure out, Joseph Scott Morgan, how it is that this professor is telling multiple stories to cops, and the school cuts him loose while his wife is missing. How horrible is it that the college fires this man while his wife is missing?
Yeah.
He's now caring for a 5-year-old boy on his own.
Yep.
What could possibly happen on that campus in the administrative building, Joe, that they would find it necessary to part company with this man while his wife is missing?
Let me give you a little insight for those that, and listen to me, y'all. I am in no way talking down to you because I work at a university. All right. Some smartest people I've ever met in my life don't have a single college credit to their name. Matter of fact, some of them didn't finish middle school. And some of the dumbest people I've ever met in my life. Well, I won't go there.
I was taught by a couple of them.
Now, let me tell you what's interesting about a university when you've got something like this that happens. It is kind of a closed loop, if you will. Universities are like cities within cities. So you have a university that is in like a town, right? And in this case, EKU, it's in Richmond, Kentucky. Now, the entire life's blood of Richmond, Kentucky is not necessarily EKU. It's a big part of it, but you have a separate community there. And then the university happens to be within that town. Trust me, it brings in a lot of dollars to that little town. You got a lot of folks up there that work at that university, and it's not just professors. Professors are the least of it. My wife told me something. She was a school teacher, and Kimmy told me something. She said, you know, the two most important people in academia are departmental secretary and the janitor. Everybody else doesn't matter. Yeah. And I've really, I have hung on to that. I try to treat all of our environmental services people with the utmost, because it's a tough job. It's a hard job, particularly clean up after me and these students. And then secretary, who is essentially runs the department in most places. Department head doesn't know what's going on half the time. Secretary does. And buddy, you better stay on her good side. And I always try to. But anyway, big shout out to Christy Kreider, my good buddy. Anyway, I think about that environment, and within that city, people talk. And let me tell you what else has been going on. Whatever investigative agency is handling this, you know, you begin to think about the state police with Kentucky. You begin to think about the sheriff's offices. You know, her remains are eventually found in Pulaski County. But they are coming onto that campus and they're questioning people. They're going to the administrative building. We call it the big house where I am, you know, where all the people are, all the VPs are, you know, and then you have the departmental areas, you know, because within the big university, you've got separate little colleges or schools. They might be called in certain places within the university, and each one of them has its own little ecosystem. People talk, you know, and the one thing they don't want to be talking about is a colleague that is under suspicion because his wife has disappeared. And here's something that happens. It's not necessarily like playing the telephone game, but trust me, if somebody comes into a department carrying a badge and a gun, and oh, by the way, the university also has its own police department. They've been involved in this, trust me, okay? They generally have their own investigators as well. So you've got this beehive that's working all the time to service the students, and then all of a sudden you inject this bit into there, people are going to wag their tongues, and it's going to make its way up to the folks in the big house, and they're saying, man, you're just too much of a liability to keep around at this point in time. We have got to put distance between us and you. Now, there might be lawsuits that would follow afterwards or whatever, but right at that moment in time, you're doing more damage than you are good, being present there. And also, let me tell you one more thing if you like that one. You got university officials that are sitting there thinking, we've had people coming around this place saying that they think this guy killed his wife, and he's still in the classroom with the students.
Yep.
That's the biggest thing. Oh, and he's down the hall from, all of his colleagues. Can you imagine going out to get a cup of coffee? Hey, Fred. Yeah. No, I hope you have a
Glenn.
good day. Yeah. Hey, Glenn, I'm going back to my office, and you lock your door. Yeah.
Yeah. We're gonna have some ribs on the barbecue grill. You want to help cut them up, Glenn?
No.
Because just so you know,
bad
they
business,
found the
man.
blood in the luminol revealed the blood possibilities in that RAV4. But you know what else it found? I forgot to mention this, Joe.
Yeah.
They found a knife in the back of that RAV4, and it also tested
had
positive.
blood
Luminol
deposition
hit on
on
it big time. Yeah, blood all over that thing.
Yeah.
But she goes missing October 2019. A couple of months later, school has heard enough, and they cut ties with Professor Glenn Jackson. That's in February. April, Jackson gets arrested. Her body, the body of Ella Jackson, is not found yet, Joe, and police arrest the professor. So obviously, the police knew a lot. And I'm guessing they found out a whole lot, as you mentioned, with the university being a city unto it, in another city.
Oh, yeah.
Holy free holies. There had to have been a lot of talk. And they tied two and two together. They put him in, they arrest him, and then they find her scattered remains. And her scattered remains are found in the next county over, in Pulaski County. But it just so happens to be, geographically speaking, Joe, in an area where Glenn Jackson owns property. Her remains are scattered. Clothing, women's clothing, is also scattered around the area where her body is found. And boy, oh boy, once they got her partial remains where they could actually examine them, Joseph Scott Morgan, what were they able to determine?
Not a lot. And that's the sad part here. I think it leaves us wanting. And we'll get to this point in just a second, what, kind of outcomes and that sort of thing. But I wanted a brief little primer about skeletal injuries here. Okay. I've shown a lot of love to forensic anthropologists on body bags, as well they deserve it. Okay. But they have limitations on what they can do. If we had a forensic pathologist and we were looking at a case involving an individual that still had soft tissue on the body, we could arrive at conclusions a lot quicker, right? I mean, that goes without saying. And, our friends are pretty bright, and, their level of knowledge, you understand that, if you've got focal areas of hemorrhage, any kind of hematoma, certainly any kind of insult to the skin, whether it be an abrasion, a scratch, a scrape, a cut, a puncture, you can appreciate that. But after animals are done, after the environment has done what it does, and you render down to what they're framing as skeletal remains, there's only a couple of places you can look, brother. And listen, here's the thing about it. You don't know if you're going to have all these elements. Even though they say they found her skeletal remains, I got to tell you, there are many cases that I've been on where we said that we found the skeletal remains. The one thing that's missing from that statement is we found all of the skeletal remains. Because, you're talking, as I've mentioned before, 206 bones in an adult body. Well, have you accounted for every single bone of the hand, every single bone of the foot? Have you found all the vertebral bodies? What's really hard to find many times are ribs. Ribs are, because they're kind of portable for animals, and they'll just haul them off to their burrows individually. Something you can see a raccoon doing this, grabbing it and running off with it, or a wild dog or whatever.
Wow.
But the one thing they did find, Dave, that is very compelling to me is they found her skull. And they were able to get her identified through dental. That's how they arrived, and that's what they're stating, that they arrived at the dental ID, or at her positive identification through the dental. But they found the skull, and the skull, Dave, um, had a rather pronounced fracture to it. Now, the trouble with this is, how are you going to do the assessment internally on the brain? Because there's a high probability you ain't got a brain anymore. Because if the body's been disarticulated, even if the animals didn't get into the skull, with decomposition, brains liquefy. Okay, so you've got what's called, if you go to the back of your head back here, you have what's called the foramen magnum. And the foramen magnum is actually the largest bony hole in the body. It's where your spinal cord comes out of. And so the brain, in the heat, will actually liquefy and dribble out of that foramen magnum in the back. It doesn't happen every time, and there's certain other things you can look for. Forensic anthropologists are really good at looking at margins on fractures and tell you if it approximates end of life or if this is a post-mortem event. And, they can begin to narrow that down. But and I know that you had posed this to me, Dave, and I want to go down this road with you, but they've ruled it as a homicide, but you're left wanting, aren't you, relative to the cause?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, I'm looking over this case, and it took so long. Okay, look, again, that's why I've mentioned that she went missing October 2019. He was fired from the university after a couple of months. Before her remains were found, he was fired. And they found her remains after he was arrested. So the investigation was zeroed in on him. They had it. Why did it take so long? We got her remains, partially, though they might have been. We had her skull. We've got her blood in the back of his RAV4. Yeah. We've got everything we could possibly, enough that he's fired, arrested before her remains are found. And then, why are we still waiting, for the reason we're doing this case now? It just got resolved. And by the way, he copped a plea.
Yeah, he did.
He copped an Alford plea.
Yeah.
It means that he's agreeing that he's not pleading guilty.
Right.
He's saying they have enough evidence that a jury would probably convict. That's what an Alford plea means in layman's terms. But we don't know so many things. We don't know why.
He's doing a very short stint in prison as a result of this.
How is that even possible?
Yeah, I know. And you look at this because he's, again, I go back to this idea, Ella's life is gone.
Yep.
The life of her kids are ruined.
Dramatically.
Just absolutely ruined. And he's going to be out. He's going to be able to have a new life, once he exits, from correctional facility. I don't know how much of a life it'll be, but it's still going to be a life. It's more than Ella has. And, we're still going to have these questions because with the Alford plea, he's not compelled to say anything else. We talk about the fracture on the skull. Look, are we missing? Why did the knife have blood on it? Was it used to stab her in soft tissue, and then as kind of the pièce de résistance, he pops her on the head and fractures her skull, to finally kill her. Can a knife create a fracture like that? Well, yeah, I suppose it could if it's rendered with enough force, but you would have very specific markings on the skull, like a puncture kind of punched out area. And the knife would have to be really robust to do this. So, there's certainly more questions than there are answers. And he's going to have 3 hots in a cot.
Yeah, but Joe, it's even different. Let me share this with you. He was sentenced to 14 years, okay? In April of this year, 2026, Ella was dead in October 2019 at his hands. They didn't find her body till April, after he was under arrest, but it took years to get this done. So here we are. In April 2026, he takes the Alford plea, and the judge sentences him to 14 years. But you know what, Joe? He was out on bail. He was at home. He was out on bail, and there were certain restrictions that applied. But he's out on bail while waiting for trial. Well, you know what? That 6 years that he was at home living his life counts on the 14 years.
Yeah.
He's getting an 8-year sentence in
Yeah.
prison. That's it.
That's it.
And he took the life. Oh my gosh. And Joe, he still hasn't told us anything.
No.
He's copped the Alford plea. He's just saying, yeah, you got enough to convict
And
me. I ain't
he
telling you
cannot
jack.
be compelled to say anything else
Nope.
either.
They did find something in. Can I tell you what they found in his jail cell? You know, when he was held in county, before, as these things are going on. Well, he had to explain something. And one was the blood. How did the blood get in your car? There was enough blood that they had him. It was, as we go down to, I know luminol is what they use to prove, but still, in his jail cell, they found 3 notes with descriptions of why Ella's blood could have been in the back of his Toyota RAV4. 3 different explanations for the blood. Now, because he copped the Alford plea, we don't know what his explanations were. We only know that this jail note had 3 different versions of what he thought he could spin. That's why I don't like this verdict. That's why I don't like anything about this case. And I'm frustrated that we are talking about a man who in 8 years could be shopping at Kroger next to one of us.
Yeah, he really could. But, he was a professor of rhetoric. So is it unusual that you would find these notes in his cell, writing this down, trying to work his way through it? I don't know, because the police have not released those notes, and they'll never see the light of day, but
No.
It is rather compelling. As for Ella, she's gone, and certainly not forgotten by her children. I hope you'll pray for them. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.